Thanks for tuning in to the Oxygen Alliance YouTube channel where we share the Concentrator Talk virtual meeting hosted every Thursday from 2 to 3 p.m. Central African Time. In the talk, we discuss different aspects of oxygen concentrator assessment, use, and maintenance. And please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notifications bell. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Oxygen Talk Call brought to you by the Oxygen Alliance. My name is Mwawi Lungu and I'm currently in Lilongwe, Malawi. So I'm very excited to announce to you that we will be changing up the format of our calls to make them more exciting for you. So in our previous calls, we were focusing on helping you with solutions on oxygen concentrator maintenance through Q&A sessions that we were holding. So moving forward, we won't just be focusing on oxygen concentrators, but we'll also be focusing on other oxygen-related topics, so be it oxygen cylinders, different oxygen delivery devices. So these topics will be prepared by our OpenO2 and Sunrise technicians. So please make sure that you join us for the calls because we have very interesting topics lined up. So we are also changing the frequency of our call to bi-weekly, but we will still maintain the 2 p.m. Central African time for now. So we'll be sending out calendar invites to everyone on our mailing list so you know what dates we'll be hosting the call on. Speaking to us today are our technicians from OpenO2, and today they will be talking about advancements in patient interface devices. So our speakers today are Kelvin Saidi, Eunice Msiska, Dominic Mapanje, Chimwemwe TSC, and Emmanuel Chauya. So without any further ado, I will now hand it over to Emmanuel to kickstart our conversation.
So thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel, and I'll take you through oxygen delivery devices, which is an Oxygen Alliance presentation. So in this presentation, we are going to cover an introductory part of the topic, and we're also going to tackle oxygen delivery devices. And under these devices, we'll talk about a simple face mask, a nasal cannula, a Venturi mask, an unbreathable mask, a BiPAP and a CPAP machine, and then we'll give you an opportunity to give in your comments and questions. So a person who cannot maintain a safe level of oxygen saturation that's in the range of 95 to 100% may require oxygen therapy. And there are various conditions that may necessitate this therapy, including asthma, bronchitis, emphysema, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Even in COVID-19, you may need you actually need oxygen therapy. Cystic fibroids, heart failure, lung cancer, or any other cancers. And those also that are suffering from pneumonia and pulmonary fibrosis may also require oxygen therapy. Now, there are a few terms that we may need to pay attention for this presentation to be productive. So we'll be talking about FiO2, which is a fraction of inspired oxygen. And often in this presentation and in many other publications, it will be presented as a percentage. And also we'll be focusing on a flow rate of these devices, which is basically a volume of air passing per unit time. So you would find that it would be written in liters per minute. We'll start with a nasal cannula. A nasal cannula is a lightweight device that is placed into nostrils of a patient. It consists of a flexible tube with two nasal prongs that are placed under the nose. The other end of the of the nasal cannula is connected to an oxygen source. So nasal cannulas may come both as a high flow and a low flow oxygen delivery device. So in the graphics, you can see a low flow nasal cannula. So on the left hand side is just a packed nasal cannula, and on the right side is a dummy putting on the nasal cannula. So a low flow nasal cannula typically has a flow rate of 1 to 6 liters per minute and a fraction of inspired oxygen, otherwise referred to as FiO2, of 24 to 44%. So in a low flow nasal cannula, you would have a 4% increase for every 1 liter per minute flow rate increase. So you would see even that from the FiO2 of a low flow nasal cannula is starting at 24, meaning that in the normal atmospheric air, we know we have 20 to 21% of oxygen. So immediately we give out 1 liter, we have increased by a 4%. That's why we're starting at 24% to 44% FiO2. Now, as I said, they come in two different arrangements of a low flow and a high flow. This time around, we talk about the high flow nasal cannula. So in the graphics, you'd see a high flow nasal cannula. On your left is just the device itself, and on your right is a device on a dummy. And this high flow nasal cannula has a flow rate of 30 to 60 liters per minute, which is really high as compared to the low flow nasal cannula, which ends at 6 liters. And the fraction of inspired oxygen for a high flow nasal cannula ranges from 21% to 100%. Nasal cannulas have advantages and disadvantages. So the advantage of a nasal cannula is that it's easy to use, as you have appreciated in the graphics, that you just have to put it on the patient and tie it around at the back of the head. And also can be worn for extended periods of time without causing discomfort. And it also allows a person to eat or speak freely because, as we said, it just goes to the nostrils. So your mouth is free. You can take in some fluids and even food. And also you can speak. The disadvantages of a nasal cannula is that it can dry out your nasal passages and cause irritation and sometimes bleeding over time. So not really very good. And also, a low flow nasal cannula may not be effective for patients who require higher concentration of oxygen. And the nasal cannulas, of course, can cause abdominal distension and pneumothorax. Pneumothorax is a condition whereby the lungs of the patient collapse. So, but these are disadvantages, or at least the two drawbacks of pneumothorax and abdominal distension. They are rare developments. They don't really happen very often. Now let's look at a simple face mask. So another device that one can use to administer an oxygen therapy is a simple face mask. And the simple face mask is a device that covers the patient's mouth and nose and is secured with an elastic strap around the head. So these are designed to deliver high concentration of oxygen than the nasal cannula. So typically ranging from 35% to 60%. If you recall very well, we said the low flow nasal cannula can give a concentration of 24 to 44%, but a simple face mask would give you as high as 60%. And the flow rate of a face mask is between 10 to 12 liters per minute. The partial breather mask has side ports that are covered with one-way discs that prevent surrounding air from entering. So As you'd see in the graphics, on your left, we have exhalation ports, and at the time that one is inhaling, they close, so you don't really have um, uh, interference of atmospheric air. And the simple face mask has also advantages and disadvantages, just like the nasal cannulas, but the simple face mask is also easy to use. You just put it on and the strap goes directly behind your head. So it's not really much of a struggle to put them on. And they are adjustable to fit a wide range of patients. So you can adjust. Actually, they come with a metal pin on top. So that is a bit flexible and you can adjust depending on the patient size. So the face masks also have a high FiO2 than the low flow nasal cannula, as already explained before. And the disadvantages of a simple face mask is that it may not be comfortable for patients to wear for extended periods of time. So um, as you'd see, the second disadvantage is that it can cause skin irritation and pressure sores. So if you wear a face mask, you may not have it on like for the whole day because you your skin starts irritating and of course you feel some discomfort. So it's not really a good option if a patient has to be on oxygen therapy for extended periods of time. Reaching this far, I give it back to Maui so we can proceed with other devices of oxygen delivery. Thank you.
Seems like Mo hasn't yet fixed the network issues, so I'll just jump in. So thank you, Emmanuel. I will now talk about non-breather masks. A non-breather mask is a medical device that helps deliver oxygen in emergency situations. So it consists of a face mask connected to a reservoir bag that's filled with high concentrated oxygen. As you can see in the graphics to the left, you have the bag, which is usually around 1 liter, the face mask, and also tubing that goes to oxygen supply, either a concentrator, oxygen tank, or a cylinder, or the main pipeline from a PSA plant. So the face mask with reservoirs commonly encountered during oxygen delivery come in two configurations. One is a non-rebreather and the other one is a partial rebreather. So the non-rebreather face mask has a one-way valve between the reservoir bag and also a one-way valve on the exhalation port from the face mask. So you can see in the graphics to the left, it has a strap, the mask, and the back, and also you can see on the exhalation on the mask 2 ports, which are the exhalation ports, which only have two one-way valves. And the one-way valve also is indicated there between the mask and the reservoir bag. So collectively, this prevents breathing of exhaled breath and maximizes the concentration of oxygen. That's the fraction of inspired oxygen for the patient. So when it comes to partial rebreather mask, they look similar to an unrebreather mask, but contains a two-way valve between the mask and the reservoir bag. So the patient can exhale about 1/3 back into the reservoir bag, and the 2/3 is exhaled and gets out to the atmosphere. So one thing to mention about the partial rebreather is you can't achieve high concentrations of oxygen because of the 1/3 that gets back into the reservoir bag. So a partial rebreather mask typically delivers 50 to 70% of oxygen to the patient. So the face mask should be sized by patient and should be secured with an elastic strap. As you can see in the graphics, there is an elastic strap there, which goes behind the head and just above the ears. The relative tight seal required can be uncomfortable for some patients. This poses as a disadvantage, and an oversized mask may also pose the same challenge, which will cause irritation. So the fraction of inspired oxygen when using face masks with the Elizabeth depends on on three things. One is flow rate, patient size, and also patient work of breathing. Patient work of breathing is related to how the ease of which the patient can breathe. So these masks are not designed to regulate pressure, and that's intended to receive low pressure gas either from the concentrator, the oxygen supply line, or oxygen cylinders. These face masks come in two or more sizes, the pediatric and adult size. They can deliver up to 50 to 90% at 10 to 20 liters respectively in adults. Consumption is liters per minute set by the user, also depending on the patient's condition. These masks are designed for single patient use. So patients who are hypoxemic without significant increase in work of breathing and require significant FiO2 to achieve oxygenation goals. So one thing that may drive a lot of people to use this is the ease of use and the low cost it has, and it is a go-to initial delivery device for critically ill patients. So another thing that should be mentioned here is these non-breather masks aren't commonly used because they come with several risks. So the risk comes when there is disruption in airflow, and this can lead to suffocation. So one can potentially choke if one vomits while wearing the face masks when they are sedated or unconscious. So always a healthcare provider should usually be in attendance during the use of this type of mask. So thank you. I think this will go over to the next person who is presenting.
Hi, Shunga. Are you able to hear me clearly now?
Yes, you're loud and clear. So I've just
Okay.
finished presenting. You can take over.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Apologies for that. I'm having very bad reception this side. So we'll move on to our next device, and that will be presented by Kelvin. So, Kelvin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maui. So I'll be talking about the Venturi mask. So to begin with, I'll start by explaining what it is. So a Venturi mask is a medical device that is used to deliver a controlled flow of oxygen to the patient who has respiratory problems, and it is a type of high flow oxygen therapy that delivers a precise amount of oxygen to the patient's lung through a mask that is attached to a tube. So as shown in the graphics, you can see how a Venturi mask looks like. Moving on, let's talk about how these Venturi masks work. So the mask has a narrow constricted section that creates what we call a Venturi effect. So this effect entrains air and dilutes the oxygen flow to a specific concentration. So the flow rate of oxygen can be adjusted by changing the size of the constriction in the mask or by attaching a different Venturi adapter. So to explain more on the Venturi effect, as I already mentioned earlier, the Venturi masks are a type of oxygen delivery system that uses a Venturi principle in order to deliver a precise and controlled amount of oxygen to the patient. So according to the Venturi principle, when a fluid, in our case a gas, when a gas flows through a narrow section of a tube, the velocity of this fluid uh, increases while the pressure decreases. So this occurs due to the conservation of mass, which requires that the mass of the fluid flowing through the narrow section of the tube must be equal to the mass flowing through the wider sections of the tube. So because the cross-sectional area of the tube is smaller in the narrow section, the fluid must flow faster to maintain the same mass rate. So this increased velocity of the fluid results in a decrease in pressure. This is according to the Bernoulli's principle. So in the context of a Venturi mask, the Venturi principle is used to draw in a precise amount of air through small ports in the mask, which create a vacuum, and this vacuum draws in a specific amount of oxygen from an oxygen source. So by adjusting the size of the ports, a specific FiO2 can be delivered to the patient. So this allows for precise controlled oxygen delivery, which is important for patients who have respiratory problems or require a specific FiO2 to maintain adequate oxygenation. So moving on, let's answer the question. The Venturi masks high or low flow devices? So Venturi masks are considered to be high flow devices because they can deliver a relatively high flow of oxygen to the patient. So the flow rates can range from 4 to 15 liters per minute, and this varies depending on the specific type of Venturi mask and the patient's needs. Moving on, we now talk about the FiO2, the fraction of inspired oxygen. So the FiO2 of a Venturi mask can be precisely controlled by changing the size of the ports on the mask. So different size ports allow for different amounts of air to be drawn in, which affects the FiO2 delivered to the patient. So the FiO2 of a Venturi mask can range from 24 to 60%, depending on the specific type of mask and the flow rate. Now let's talk about the specific types of Venturi masks that are used. So as I already stated earlier, the the proximal end of the mask contains a Venturi adapter, and this adapter is a mechanism that uses a narrow constricted section to create a Venturi effect. So the Venturi devices in Venturi masks are color coded to indicate the recommended oxygen flow rate necessary to provide the desired oxygen concentration to the patient. So as you can see in the graphics, various colors of the adapters also refer to various concentrations and flow rates. So the use of this color coding is a helpful visual aid for the healthcare professionals to easily identify the appropriate Venturi device to use for a specific patient's oxygen needs. The Venturi devices, so they typically range in color from blue, which symbolizes low flow, to green, which symbolizes high flow. So this will allow for precise and controlled oxygen delivery to the patient, while at the same time minimizing the risk of oxygen toxicity or inadequate oxygenation. But upon conducting research, it has been found that uh, it has been found out that the color coding has not been standardized across all manufacturers. So therefore, there may be variations in the colors used to indicate the flow rate or FiO2 delivered. But however, there are some commonly used color codes, as we saw earlier, that are widely recognized and used in many healthcare settings. So a word of caution would be that the healthcare professionals must verify the flow rate and oxygen concentration that is indicated on the Venturi device and not solely rely on the color coding to ensure accurate oxygen delivery to the patient. So you do this to avoid the oxygen toxicity and inadequate oxygen supply. Now let's talk about the advantages of Venturi masks. So the first advantage is the precise control of FiO2. So as earlier explained, Venturi masks can provide a precise and controlled amount of oxygen to the patient. And this is important for those patients who require a specific FiO2. Another advantage is the high flow rate. So Venturi masks can deliver a relatively high flow of oxygen to the patient. So this is important for those patients with severe respiratory distress. Another good thing about these masks is that they are comfortable. And according to research, these Venturi masks are generally considered to be more comfortable for patients to wear, which is important for patients who require oxygen therapy for extended periods of time. And last but not least, they can be used in a variety of settings, such as hospitals, clinics, and at home. Now let's talk about the disadvantages of these Venturi masks. The first one is the complex design. So these masks can be more complex and expensive than other types of oxygen delivery systems, and they are not suitable for all patients. So these Venturi masks, as I stated earlier, they have an FiO2 varying from 24 to 60%. So this means that if you have a patient who requires a higher FO2 oxygen supply, say for example 80%, this cannot be achieved by these Venturi masks. Another disadvantage is that if these Venturi masks are not properly cleaned or sterilized between uses, they can pose a risk of infection. It is also important to note that they do require more supervision. So the flow rate of oxygen is adjusted by changing the size of the Venturi adapter. And the amount of oxygen delivered is determined by a specific color-coded adapter. So because the delivery of oxygen is dependent on these settings, it is important for healthcare professionals to closely monitor the patient's respiratory status and adjust the settings as needed. So this requires more frequent checks and adjustments other than the other oxygen delivery devices, such as nasal cannulas and simple face masks, which deliver oxygen at a relatively constant flow rate. And lastly, these Venturi masks can interfere with eating and drinking. So for someone who requires a continuous supply of oxygen, this might pose a challenge to them. Thank you. That's all I had for you on Venturi masks. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for that wonderful explanation. I think that was well detailed. I was also not very familiar with these Venturi masks, so at least I've managed to pick up a thing or two. Pretty sure you also have learned a thing or two from there as well. So we'll now move on to our final device, and Eunice is going to take us through.
So I'll present on the two devices, the CPAP and the BiPAP machine. So CPAP is an abbreviation that stands for continuous positive air pressure, and BiPAP is also an abbreviation that stands for a bilevel positive air pressure. So as you can see in the graphics, we can see two different machines that look almost the same, but these are actually two different machines. So the one on the left is the BiPAP, and the one on the right is the CPAP machine. So these machines, I can say they're almost the same. The difference between the two machines is the pressure setting. So these are two types of non-invasive respiratory support used to treat patients with respiratory distress. And both devices deliver air at a set pressure to help keep the patient's airways open and facilitate breathing. So now I'm going to talk about the CPAP. So this device delivers a continuous stream of air at a set pressure to keep the airway open. A CPAP machine takes in room air, then filters and pressurizes it before delivering it through a tube and into a patient's mask to maintain a steady flow of breath. As you can see in the graphics, we're seeing a dummy that is actually wearing a mask, and the diagram is labeled ABC, and the part labeled A is the machine itself, and B is the tubing, and C is the mask. Now let's look at the parts of a CPAP. Like we have seen in the previous slide, there are three main parts that make up that machine, and these are the motor. So the motor is enclosed in the machine itself, a CPAP hose or tubing, and a CPAP mask. So the motor brings in air from the room to pressurize it according to how you have set your machine. The air is always at room temperature, and some machines have a water tank to moisturize the air. The motor also includes a CPAP filter to remove impurities from the air. So motors on most machines run quietly and will not usually interrupt sleep. And the pressurized air then moves from the motor through the connected CPAP hose to the mask. The mask, which fits snugly on the patient's face, moves the pressurized air into the patient's airway and lungs continuously to prevent any collapse or obstruction. So the CPAP filter is important in purifying the air that comes from the outside of the machine entering into the patient's nose. And there are several types of air filters. Some are reusable and some are disposable, and they vary in the size of the particulate that they filter out. The humidifier is an optional CPAP machine part that increases the moisture of the air that is delivered through the mask. So a CPAP humidifier is a device that releases moisture from a small tank of distilled water into the air that the patients breathe. So many CPAP users complain of dry mouth and nose while using the CPAP machines. So the CPAP humidifier reduces this problem. So this is done especially in cold, dry areas with low moisture. And many humidifiers are adjustable by increasing the heat of the water tank. There are two ways CPAP humidifier can add moisture to pressurized air. So heated humidifiers typically use a hot plate beneath the water chamber to heat the water. It sends the moisturized air through routed tubing to the mask, delivering moisturized air for the patient to breathe. And another method is the pass-over humidification, and this is done when air passes over room temperature water in the chamber, picking up moisture, then carrying it through the tube to the patient's mask and airway. It is typically a lower pressure delivery, and this method generally delivers cold air, but you can use heated CPAP tubing to warm the air. So the continuous flow of air gently keeps the tongue, uvula, and soft palate from shifting too far into one's airway. This stabilizes breathing and improves the overall sleep quality, and it is mostly commonly used to treat obstructive sleep apnea. So the advantages of a CPAP is that, one, it is a non-invasive treatment option that does not require intubation or surgery, and it is also relatively easy to use. It can also be adjusted to meet the needs of the patient. And the disadvantages are that some patients may experience discomfort or difficulty adjusting to wearing the mask, and also difficulty in exhaling against the airflow pressure of the machine because it supplies a singular constant pressure. And also long-term adherence to CPAP therapy can be challenging for some patients. Now I'm going to talk about the BiPAP. So similar to the CPAP machine, and like I said, like it's very, very similar to the CPAP machine, and it provides 2 levels of air pressure, and that is what differentiates the 2 machines. And this is why it is also called a bi-level machine. So when using a BiPAP machine, a person takes in pressurized air through a mask to regulate their breathing pattern while they are asleep or when their symptoms flare. And this machine has the same parts as those of a CPAP machine. So it has the machine itself that has the motor, the filter, the chamber that has water, and also the tubing and the mask. So while using a BiPAP, you receive positive air pressure when you breathe in and when you breathe out. So when you receive a higher air pressure when you breathe in, while in CPAP, it delivers the same amount of pressure as you breathe in and out. So these machines are called bi-level because they have 2 air pressure settings. So when you breathe in, BiPAP machines deliver more air pressure, and this is also known as inspiratory positive air pressure. And when you breathe out, the machine reduces the air pressure, and this is called expiratory positive air pressure. Some BiPAP machines have a timer that can be programmed to maintain a certain number of breaths per minute. It is often used to treat patients with respiratory failure, such as those with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, congestive heart failure, or sleep apnea. So the advantages of this machine is that it is highly effective in improving respiratory function in patients with respiratory distress. And it can also be adjusted to meet the specific needs of the patient, such as adjusting the levels of the pressure during inhalation and exhalation. The disadvantage is that this machine is typically more expensive than a CPAP and may be more difficult to use and adjust for some patients. It may also cause discomfort or skin irritation around the mask and may not be suitable for all patients with respiratory distress. So now let us look at the masks that can be used on a BiPAP or CPAP machine. So on this machine, you can use a full face mask. So this one will cover your nose and the mouth, as you can see in the graphics. This mask will cover the nose and the mouth. And also you can use a nasal mask, and this one will fit over your nose only. And it will offer a lighter fit than a full face mask. You can also use a nasal pillow mask, and these ones are even more lightweight and minimal than nasal masks, offering a high level of openness and visibility. So factors that affect the delivered oxygen, this will depend on the concentration of oxygen source and also the patient's respiratory pattern. So on the pattern, we're looking at the peak inspiratory flow, which is the maximum flow generated during a forced inspiratory maneuver, and also minute ventilation. And this refers to the volume of gas inhaled or exhaled from a person's lungs per minute. So oxygen consumption for a BiPAP or CPAP is widely variable depending on the device used and the leak of the system. And oxygen flow ranges differ for neonates, children, and adults. So these machines can either be high flow or low flow because these machines are always set, and oxygen flow ranges from 10 to 80 liters per minute. The fraction of inspired oxygen ranges from 21 to 100% depending on how the machine has been set. So that's what I had for you on the BiPAP and CPAP machine. Thank you, and back to you, Mao.
Thank you, Eunice, for that wonderful presentation on the BiPAP and CPAP machines. So I hope you have managed to capture everything that was presented. So this now brings us to the end of the topic that we prepared for you, where we're discussing different devices used in oxygen delivery. So if we have any questions from the audience, the floor is now open. We can either raise our hand or just come off mute, and then you can ask a question from any of the multiple devices that have been presented to us. So the floor is open for questions. Questions, comments are also invited. If you have a comment on any of the devices that have been discussed, you are also free to make those comments. Okay, silence means people understood everything. Okay, so we have a hand from Irene. Yeah, you can come off mute and ask the question.
All right. Just wanted to comment. Okay, to give up feedback concerning the presentation. The presentation was clear and well understood. For me, I've learned a lot from the areas that this presentation focused on. Despite that, I joined a little late, so I would love if you share the recording with me. I've shared my email address at in messages section, so that would help. But everything is well understood for the parts that I attended. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Irene, for that positive feedback. Thank you, Roland. I also see your comment in the chat for your feedback. So the presentation will be available on our YouTube channel and on Facebook. So you can access it from these two platforms, or you can also just go straight to our website. I'll paste the links in the chat, and you'll be able to catch up on the parts that you missed. Any other questions or comments before we wind up?
Yeah. Yes. I had a concern.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Hello? Yeah. For my facility, I'm speaking from Liberia and Jackson Abdo. We have a problem, and most of our problem have to do with power source, and we often use the cylinder bottles. So my concern had to do with what are the CPAP or what would be the advices in using the CPAP and that of the PPAP machine.
I missed the first part of the question. Can you just come again?
Yeah, my concern is that my facility more often we have a power issue. So
Yeah.
most of our oxygen supply is a cylinder bottle. We transport the cylinder bottles on the various walls on patient and other things. So in case the power drop, because we have minimal concentrators on the various walls. So we most often it depends on the cylinder bottle. So what could be some recommendation in using the CPAPs in that of the BPAP machine?
Eunice, do you want to take this up since it's a question concerning the machine that you have just presented on? So maybe just to play. Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't know if I got you right. So you were saying you're using oxygen cylinders in your area and that you do not have electricity. Is that so?
Yeah, our electricity is not often regular. Not regular. Sometimes we have a power issue. Sometimes the city current come 1 2 days it's off. Sometimes we have a generator for 3 hours, 4 hours operation. Then it go off the rest of the time. Sometimes we feed on the oxygen cylinders.
Okay, so mostly the CPAP and the BiPAP machines are used in homes to treat patients that are having sleep distress, especially
Okay.
those suffering from sleep apnea. So
Okay.
for this, yeah, sure. So for the cylinders, you are treating patients that are actually very sick, like they can't even breathe on their own. But for
Okay.
the patient, yeah, for the patients that use the CPAP, they're able to breathe, but then sometimes when they sleep, their throat gets, I can say, obstructed by, I mean, what should I say? The airway collapses. So we want the
Okay.
machines help to provide a constant positive
Uh-huh.
air pressure to their throats. So
Okay.
that's what I can say on that one.
I understand. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
Mm.
Okay, great. Any other comments? All right, so we also have a comment in the chat from Michael. So he says you need a device that is compatible low resource settings, e.g. Vayu CPAP. Michael, would you want to just come off mute and clarify on your comments?
There are CPAPs that do not use electrical motors to drive in medical air in the event that you'd want to do the blending of oxygen and air. So Vayu CPAP does not use electricity. It uses an oxygen cylinder, and by virtue of the Venturi effect, the blending takes place, and hence you can be able to achieve the FiO2s that you desire. So this is just to answer the gentleman who had a problem with power. And there are some CPAPs that do not use power, they just use the pneumatic principle. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Good, thank you.
All right, great. So thank you for those questions and comments. So looking at our time, we have reached the hour mark, and this now brings us to the end of our call today. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us for this week's talk. Please make sure to join us again for our next talk. We're going to send out calendar invites so you plan in advance for when our next call is going to happen. So as I explained at the beginning, we'll be doing these calls bi-weekly, so we won't be having this call next week, but then we'll send out an invite for the following week. So if it's your first time joining the call and you are not on our mailing list, you can just paste the link in your email address in the chat, and then I'll make sure that you get added to our mailing list. So we also have a YouTube channel where we upload all our recordings of the call. So if you missed part of the call, please make sure you go on our YouTube channel. So the calls are also broadcasted live to our Facebook page. If you just search for Oxygen Alliance on Facebook, you will be able to access this call. So you can either go on YouTube, Facebook, or on our website, and you'll be able to access this course. So thank you very much for joining us for the call today. Have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you again in our next call. Bye, everyone.
I want to find out something. Is it Oxygen Alliance have a WhatsApp number? A WhatsApp account?
Right now, no, but I can share my WhatsApp contact if there's something that you would like to discuss.